Take a second and just picture this really epic scene.
Okay.
Imagine a sunrise just cresting over this ancient hand-drawn map of the world. You know, golden light spreading across all the continents. It's a massive, mysterious world.
Right.
And today on this deep dive, we are unpacking the life of a guy who basically looked at that map and decided he wanted all of it. The ultimate overachiever. I mean, we're talking about a man who conquered the known world before he even turned 30.
Yeah, and then by 32, he was dead.
Right.
And the largest empire in human history was already just completely tearing itself apart.
It's wild. So to be clear, for everyone listening, we aren't just here to recite a boring timeline of ancient battles.
No, not at all.
Our mission today is to really deconstruct the psychology, you know, the mechanisms behind a man who completely rejected the physical limits of his reality, Alexander the Great.
It really is the ultimate case study in the architecture of power, because you're looking at what happens when absolute, almost fanatical self-belief is backed up by an unparalleled military machine.
It's a terrifying combination.
Exactly. And Alexander's life presents this incredible paradox. The exact psychological traits required to violently conquer the globe. I mean, the paranoia, the restlessness, that addiction to extreme risk.
Yeah.
Those are the exact same traits that render a person entirely incapable of governing during peacetime.
Wow. Okay, so to understand how that specific psychology gets built, we really have to look at the conditioning he received, like, from day one.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're in Macedonia. It's 356 BC. You have his father, King Philip, who is this warrior king actively revolutionizing Greek warfare. But then you have his mother, Queen Olympias.
Olympias is such a fascinating figure.
She really is, because she doesn't just, raise a prince. She actively installs this total god complex right into her son's operating system.
That is the perfect way to describe it. I mean, picture this softly lit stone room. Glowing oil lamps, shadows on the wall. Olympias was fiercely devoted to the ancient Greek cults, and she would relentlessly whisper bedtime stories into a young Alexander's ear. But she wasn't just telling him myths. She was telling him that his true lineage didn't just trace back to Macedonian kings.
Right, it went higher than that.
Much higher. She told him he was descended from Achilles.
Wait, literally Achilles, the hero from the Trojan War?
Literally Achilles.
Yeah.
The legendary, invincible demigod. And, when a child is told repeatedly that his veins carry the blood of a god, it fundamentally alters his risk calculus.
I bet.
For Alexander, the idea that he was destined for eternal glory, it wasn't arrogance to him, it was just the baseline reality he operated from.
He just accepted it as fact.
Right.
And I want to look at how that altered risk calculus actually translates into action. Because there's this really specific incident from his childhood.
Oh, the wild horse.
Yes, Bucephalus. And I love this story because the traditional framing is always just a brave boy taming a beast that grown men couldn't handle.
Right, the hero myth.
Exactly. But if you look at the actual mechanics of what happened in that dusty courtyard, it's a masterclass in diagnosing the root cause of a failure.
Well, the context here is super important for you to understand just how dangerous this was. Macedonian cavalry relied on these massive, powerful war horses.
Right. These weren't like petting zoo ponies.
No, these were weapons. And Bucephalus is this violent black horse rearing up and throwing off the absolute best veteran riders in the kingdom.
Just total chaos.
Complete chaos. And the soldiers are trying to treat the situation as a contest of pure physical dominance. They're basically trying to meet the horse's panic with brute force.
Right. It's like a tech glitch where everyone is just mashing the keyboard trying to force it to work.
Yes, perfect analogy.
But then here comes a 12-year-old Alexander, and he just steps back and observes. He realizes the horse isn't intrinsically wild. It's just terrified of its own shadow moving on the ground.
He sees what everyone else missed.
Exactly. So he just walks up, takes the reins, and calmly turns the animal to face the sun. The shadow falls behind it, the horse immediately calms down, and he just gets on and rides it.
It's an incredible moment.
He didn't outmuscle the animal at all. He just identified the environmental trigger and removed it.
And King Philip famously watches this happen, right? And he turns to his son and says, Macedonia is simply too small for you.
What a thing to hear from your dad.
Right. But analytically, what Alexander demonstrated there, that calm observation mixed with bold action, that becomes the foundation of his entire military philosophy.
How so?
Well, you don't defeat an overwhelming force by matching its energy directly. You observe the geometry of the situation, you find the psychological blind spot, and you exploit it.
Wow. And that analytical capability, it really gets put on steroids when he turns 13.
Ah, yes. A new tutor.
Right, because his father hires Aristotle, arguably the greatest mind of the ancient world. So imagine this peaceful, sunlit olive grove, and you have this teenager who is learning heavy cavalry charges in the morning and then empirical philosophy, geography, and medicine in the afternoon.
Quite the curriculum.
It is. But I've always found this combination slightly, I don't know, contradictory.
How do you mean?
Well, we know Alexander carried a heavily annotated copy of Homer's Iliad with him on literally every campaign. It was his blueprint for violent glory. So how does the brutal warfare of the Iliad coexist with Aristotle's teachings on, like, medicine and ethics?
Yeah, it seems like a contradiction if we view philosophy as inherently pacifist.
Yeah.
But ancient philosophy was highly pragmatic.
Okay.
Aristotle didn't teach Alexander to be gentle. He taught him how to categorize and understand the physical world.
Oh, I see.
When you are moving an army of tens of thousands of men across uncharted continents, warfare isn't just swinging swords. It becomes a massive logistical and scientific equation.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. Aristotle's training in geography meant Alexander knew how to read terrain. His training in medicine meant he knew how to treat diseases. Aristotle essentially handed him the cognitive framework to manage the extreme variables of global conquest.
And that cognitive framework gets tested almost immediately, right?
Oh.
Because the supervised training ends very abruptly.
Very.
So picture a teenage commander. At 16, he's already crushing rebellions. At 18, he's leading the cavalry in major battles.
Rising confidence, for sure.
But then the tone drops. It's serious. Alexander is just 20 years old when King Philip is murdered.
Instantly, there's a massive power vacuum.
Right. Imagine standing in this heavy, shadow-filled stone hall, a 20-year-old kid suddenly wearing the crown, and every rival, every subjugated Greek city-state smells blood in the water.
The transition of power in the ancient world is always the moment of maximum vulnerability. And the Greek city of Thebes revolts, assuming this new kid lacks his father's iron grip.
And what does he do? Because this is where the philosopher king idea gets really dark.
It does. Alexander's response is a terrifying display of calculated political violence. He marches his forces south at a speed the Greeks honestly thought was impossible. He completely overwhelms Thebes and then...
This part is so brutal.
It really is. He utterly annihilates the city. I mean, he levels the buildings, sells the survivors into slavery, and essentially wipes a major center of the Greek culture completely off the map.
Which forces us to ask why. I mean, why level a city instead of executing the leaders and negotiating a treaty? It feels like the total opposite of what Aristotle would suggest.
Well, because negotiation requires time, and it signals that the king is willing to compromise.
And he wasn't.
Not at all. Alexander was operating on a much larger strategic timeline. His father had spent his whole life planning an invasion of the Persian Empire. Alexander wanted to execute that plan.
But he couldn't do that with Greece acting up behind him.
Exactly. He couldn't march into Asia if he had to constantly look over his shoulder. So the destruction of Thebes was a horrific, mathematically precise equation of terror.
A cold, powerful warning.
By burning one city to ash, he guaranteed the absolute paralyzed submission of the rest of Greece. He secured his rear flank permanently.
Wow. Okay, so the board is set. It's 334 BC.
A tapestry of myth
and I want you to
and
picture
uncharted
this
territory.
epic, hopeful
Behold,
scene.
the
A
world is
massive
the
army
ancient
crossing the
sword,
narrow sea
a
with
tapestry
ships,
of myth
banners
and
flying against the
uncharted
sunrise.
He's crossing the Hellespont.
Right. Stepping into the territory of the Persian Empire, which we should point out is an absolute juggernaut.
Oh, near limitless wealth, manpower, resources.
And Alexander has just 40,000 men. And almost immediately, he faces a massive Persian army waiting for him at the Granicus River.
Now, crossing a river against a fortified enemy position is it's one of the most dangerous maneuvers in ancient warfare.
Because you're bottlenecked in the water.
You're bottlenecked, you're fighting against the current, and the enemy has the high ground on the opposite bank.
Watch out.
Conventional military doctrine says you take a slow, cautious approach.
But of course, Alexander threw his conventional doctrine right out the window. He realizes that if he hesitates, he loses the psychological advantage. So he literally leads the heavy cavalry straight into the splashing water, charging directly into the teeth of the Persian defense.
It was incredibly intense.
Fast-paced, arrows flying everywhere, close combat. The fighting is so chaotic that Alexander's helmet is actually cleaved open by a Persian axe.
He was literally seconds away from death.
Yeah, saved only because his commander, Clytus, severs the attacker's arm. It's totally reckless, but the sheer velocity of his strike shatters the Persian line.
And that velocity, that momentum, it becomes his signature. As he pushes deeper into Asia, we get to this symbolic moment that perfectly captures his whole vibe.
The Gordian knot.
Yes. So in the city of Gordium, there's this ancient, incomprehensibly complex knot of bark. And the local Vith said that whoever could untie it would be destined to rule all of Asia.
Right, and for generations, guys have been treating it like a puzzle, right? Picking at the edges, trying to finesse it.
Exactly. Trying to solve it on its own terms.
And Alexander just walks up, draws his sword, and completely hacks it in half.
It's such a brilliant piece of political theater.
It reminds me of a modern business leader completely ignoring industry standards to just